Having a chronic illness, my mood swings by the day, sometimes by the hour. Do you ever wish you could have a candle for every emotion you go through? Well, now you do. Introducing our emotion candles. Feeling anxious? Light our anxiety candle. Feeling tired? Light our pooped out candle. Feeling frisky? Stressed out? Sad? We've got you covered. See all of our designs at SpoonFull of Strength on Etsy. That's SpoonFull with 2 L's. Use code PODCAST for 20% off. Welcome to SpoonFull of Strength, a podcast for people with chronic illness and the ones who love them, where we talk all things chronic. Here's your host, Rachel and Tina.
Right, welcome to a special Thursday episode of Spoonful of Strength. I am Tina, and today we are going to take the opportunity to get to know our founder of Spoonful of Strength, Rachel, and get to know her a little more and the health journeys that she has been on. Welcome, Rachel, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I really enjoyed, learning a little bit more about your journey and excited to share mine.
So tell us a little bit, Rachel, about your health journey from, I think your very first diagnosis is diabetes, was your type 1 diabetes. So walk us through that.
Yeah, I really had a pretty healthy childhood. I did have mono when I was 12. But other than that, I was really pretty healthy. I was involved in not sports. Lord knows I can't play sports, but I was involved in music and everything. But I really was really healthy. And at the age of 21, now I'm going to date myself, but that's way back in 1998, I just started not feeling well. And it wasn't anything drastic. It was kind of something that just kind of grew a little bit. And I started getting more and more fatigued and just noticing I was spending a little bit more time on the couch or in bed than I used to. I was drinking. I was constantly thirsty, and I drinking a whole lot. That of course I was urinating a lot and just felt just yucky. And this is before you could get on Google and put in your symptoms and it would give you a million things that could be wrong. So I went to my mom. She was a nurse, and I just said, "Mom, I don't feel good, and this is what's going on." And she had mentioned, well, it kind of sounds like diabetes, but I don't think that's necessarily what we're looking at. And so we just kind of said, well, let's just wait and see, what happens. And it continued to kind of linger. And, at that point, I was still not sure that it was diabetes, but I kind of felt like it was. And I was at the point where, and this was probably one of my mistakes, is that I made an appointment with my doctor and I didn't tell anybody. And I told my mom I had to work late. And because I thought if I go in there and I say, I think I have diabetes and I don't, then I'm going to look like a fool. And I'm probably just imagining this anyway. And all of those things that run through your head. But I went to the doctor and they did luckily with diabetes, it's a very simple test, yes or no, black and white. You do a urine test and they see if they find sugar or ketones in your urine. And so the doctor came back and said, yeah, you've got diabetes. And, I did regret not having somebody with me at that time because that was truly, life-changing news, something I would be dealing with for the rest of my life. And at that moment, I didn't really realize how much that would affect me. So I was sent to a endocrinologist, and at first I was kind of in this weird position where I was 21. I'm not a kid, so type 1 diabetes didn't really fit. Usually that's something that's diagnosed at younger ages, maybe 7, 8, 10. And I was kind of too young to be a type 2 diabetic. That's usually a later adult onset diabetes. And so they weren't really sure what to do with me. So my doctor said, well, we're going to start you on the oral medicine that we normally would do with somebody who is a type 2, and we'll see if it works. If it works, you're type 2, and if it doesn't, you're type 1, and we'll get you on insulin. And the medicine actually helped quite a bit. It was a little bit of a challenge. Back in the day, it was called carb counting, where you took your medicine at certain times, and at lunch you had to have like 30 grams of carbohydrates, and you had to have this many carbohydrates at dinner, and it was a very strict diet. And if you ate more, you would end up with a high blood sugar, and if you ate less, you'd end up with a low blood sugar. And so it was a very much of a balancing act with that. But the pills seemed to work, and that was 1998. Take it to summer of 2000, I got married, and everything was going well. And probably a month or so after I got married, all of a sudden my blood sugars just started to skyrocket, just out of nowhere. I would take my medicine in the morning, and I would not even eat anything, and my blood sugar would be 400. And this was back in the day where you had your little tester, and you had to test, 4 or 5 times a day just to keep an eye on everything. And so I went back into the endocrinologist, and they said, you might actually be type 1 because, they've seen people that have like a honeymoon period with the pills, but that's normally maybe weeks or months. And I had been on them almost 2 years. And so they immediately got me into insulin. And I think at the very beginning, I was up to 8 shots a day, which was quite overwhelming. That was difficult, doing all of those shots. And I quickly got tired of it and realized there was another option. Here I was newly married, looking to start a family. I wanted to be as healthy as I could for my kids and for my pregnancies. And so in November of 2000, that was almost exactly 2 years after my diagnosis, I went on an insulin pump, which back in the day was just a vial of insulin in this little machine, and it had a tube, and the tube went into your stomach, and you had to change the site, every 3 days or so. And it would give you, I guess how I explain it is like an IV drip, in the hospital. It gives you a basal rate of insulin based on your body's natural cycles of blood sugar. And then when you ate something, you would figure out how many carbohydrates you ate, and you would give yourself an extra dose of insulin to cover your meals. And so, it takes months to get it figured out. A lot of low blood sugars, a lot of high blood sugars, because they have to find your natural rhythm of what your body needs in insulin. And so that was, a little bit of a journey with that. But ultimately, I was able to get on the insulin pump, and I was able to have 3 pregnancies that I was healthy, and I was able to keep my blood sugars under control, which ultimately led to, just overall, a better pregnancy and healthier babies. So it was definitely worth it. And I am still on an insulin pump, although times have changed in the 25 years, I think, that I've been diabetic. Now you've got your continuous glucose monitor that at any moment I can look at my phone and see what my blood sugar is. Times have changed quite a bit. But that was kind of, my diabetic journey. I've had a few times where I ended up in the hospital with ketoacidosis, which is when your blood sugars stay high, whether it be from an illness or anything like that, stay high and they won't come down, and you have to go into the hospital, and they have to give you insulin through an IV bag, and it can be something you can die from. So I was very lucky that I was able to, within a day or so, get back to normal and feel better. And it was definitely scary, but it comes with the territory. So, I luckily with all the advances and everything, I've been able to keep my blood sugars in well control. My A1C, which is kind of your report card on how you're doing, has been under the threshold for probably 10 years, which is good. So it's still a daily issue. It's still a struggle sometimes, but overall, I'm been able to control it fairly well. A couple years ago, my husband wanted to give me an MS t-shirt for my birthday. All he could find, though, were brightly colored t-shirts with big graphics, like a smiley face given 2 middle fingers, and words like F U M S. Isn't there an option for a simple, stylish t-shirt that spreads awareness with kindness? That's when I created SpoonFull of Strength, shirts that are inspirational, motivational, and stylish. You can find us on Etsy, Instagram, and Facebook at SpoonFull of Strength. That's Spoonful with 2 L's. Enter code podcast for 20% off anything in the shop.
That was 1998
Yep.
when that all happened. And, it took a few years to get everything under control and get you on the right path for that. Walk us through your MS journey. When did you start having symptoms? And I'm sure that was initially not even what you were thinking was going on when that started, and that whole process of finding out that you had MS and figuring out your treatments and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So very similar to you, my MS diagnosis was originally thought to be something else, and it was a very long journey to get the MS diagnosis. But it was late in 2009. I think it was November. I was working full time as a manager for Sears Portrait Studio. Shout out. They're no longer here, but I was working as a manager, and I was getting ready for work, and my toes went numb, and I thought, I must have sat wrong or, whatever it might be. And I kind of ignored it. And, within 10, 15 minutes, my feet felt weird. And I chalked it off to, whatever it might be. I really didn't think too much of it. And then, my ankles. And then by the time the numbness had gotten up to, above my ankles, I started getting a little bit concerned. I tried walking it off. I tried, doing some things, and nothing, would kind of relieve that. And so I called my endocrinologist at the time and explained what was going on. And they said, yeah, you need to come into the office. And by the time I had gotten into the office, the numbness had reached just under my knees. And, they were very concerned of something called Guillain-Barré, which at that point, what they had told me in the doctor's office was that the numbness would continue to come up my legs and eventually would reach the point of my lungs, and they would have to put me on a ventilator. And I mean, we're talking maybe a 9-month recovery, you're learning how to walk again, all of these things they're telling me. And they said, we're taking you to the hospital right now. And I went into the hospital. And at that time, I think it was maybe around the time of H1N1 or something like that. But they tested me for that. They tested to see, they went through my medical history. I had recently had a cold and was on like a Z-Pack, and they thought, well, maybe it's, from the medicine, maybe you're having a reaction to it and all of that. And So their idea was just to monitor me at that point. And I am very happy to say that the numbness did not go past my knees, and they really had no idea what happened. I was sent home, I think, after 4 days, and had a very hard time walking, was very fatigued. And it probably took maybe a month or so to get back to where I could walk normal and feel better. And things kind of calmed down, and I saw a neurologist. They did an MRI of my brain, and they said, well, there's a couple spots on there, but nothing that we think is anything to worry about. And we'll just kind of keep an eye on you. And the very next year, it happened again. I didn't end up going to the hospital at that point. I went into the doctor, and at that point, I think the numbness was mostly just in my legs. And again, had about a month recovery of, getting to walk a little bit better and all of that. And so again, they did the MRI, and they said, well, we don't see any change. And so at that point, they were just watching everything. And then I had a couple good years where, I felt good. I was working full time. I was, enjoying my career life. I was a multi-unit manager, so I was doing a lot of traveling. I was managing multiple locations of stores, and I loved it. I was, really enjoying that life. My husband took a job at a school that he, really enjoyed, and so everything was looking really good, and we were just enjoying life at that point. I would say probably 2014, later, maybe in 2014, things just started kind of getting a little bit worse. And, the numbness was happening more often. I was tired, and I chalked it up to my work schedule. And just the fatigue was getting more intense and things like that. And so as I'm being monitored over these years, and I've had MRIs every few years, things just kind of went into overdrive. And so 2015, my doctor sat me down, and he said, I am going to make a diagnosis when I am 100% sure. He said, we're looking into MS, and he said it could be MS. I just don't know. But he said the treatment for MS is pretty hard. And so we're not going to take this lightly. We are going to make sure that this is what you have before we put you on all these medicines. And I appreciated that, because I didn't want to be put on medication for something that I may or may not have. But summer of 2015, he said, okay, let's do the whole workup. We're going to do blood work. I had a spinal tap done. I had MRI done on my brain and my spine. And in October of that year, I got a call from my doctor's nurse, and she said, yeah, we kind of think this is what we're looking at, putting all the pieces together. MS is not like diabetes, where you take a blood test or urine test and it comes out positive. It's very much as what Tina explained about fibromyalgia. It's a puzzle, and not one test is going to say, yes, you have MS. It's the idea of putting it all together and putting all the pieces together to get the diagnosis. So in October, she had called, and she said, the only thing we have left to do is the neuropsych evaluation, which is going to show if there's any cognitive difficulties or decline. And she said, here's some pamphlets on some of the drugs that we would like for you to consider. And we kind of waited at that point. And I had the neuropsych testing come in December, and that did show some cognitive decline, and I was officially diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS, which is what about 85% of people with MS go into, because there's 4 different types. And that means that you have a flare-up, you relapse, and all your symptoms, the dial gets turned up. You may have new symptoms come in. You may have just an intensity of the other symptoms. And then normal treatment is Solumedrol or steroids. And my first flare up, I did steroids in the hospital for 4 days. Ended up being the worst mistake because of my type 1 diabetes. My blood sugars went out of control. I ended up with pancreatitis, all of that. So my relapses look a little bit different going forward. But I ended up starting on medication in early 2016 called Abagio. It was kind of like a starter medication. It was one of those that they put everybody on when they first start out. And I took that for a few years until I think I had 3 relapses in a matter of a year. And so I was off of that. 2016, I did take a leave of absence from work. My doctor said, you cannot be working 60, 70 hours a week. We don't feel comfortable with you driving all these ways. You've got to take a break. And I ended up taking a break for a few months. And then it ultimately led to the decision that my body was not going to allow me to work at that position anymore. And so I left work, and that led me into a really hard period of my life. And I know we're going to have some episodes on depression and anxiety and mental health, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But there was probably a 2 or 3 year time frame in that time that was really scary and was really difficult. My husband had to quit his job at the school to take a higher paying job because I wasn't bringing in the income. And I entered into therapy in 2017, which honestly saved my life, saved my marriage. It took a while. I was in it consistently for about 5 years, but definitely helped get me to where I am today. MS is just a progressive disease, and I've been on many therapies with different side effects. I was on Ocrevus in 2019, and that gave me, I ended up with colitis. I went on a drug called Zeposia, which gave me breathing issues. I was on a drug called Vumerity that gave me full body rashes, like skin's on fire, all of that. And I've been on Kesimpta now for a year with no side effects. So I'm really happy that that's happened. But throughout this journey, other things have popped up. I started having muscle issues in 2017, just lower strength in my limbs. I did a test called MIP-MEP, which is a respiratory function testing that measures the muscles around your lungs. And ultimately, a normal person's over 80%, and I came in at 30%. Being on the Zeposia drug actually dropped me down to 15%, which is why we got off of that, and I've been able to keep back up at that 30%. I did have a hysterectomy in 2019 because I had pelvic floor weakness. I had a prolapsed uterus. I have had multiple stomach issues, and come to find out I have muscle weakness in my colon, which I've been diagnosed with colonic inertia. So dealing with a lot of muscle issues in the last 5 or 6 years, in addition to the regular MS diagnosis. But, MS is a beast. MS is called the snowflake disease because there's over 100 different symptoms that a person can have. And so my MS journey is not going to be like anybody else's, and my symptoms may not be like the next person or the next. Currently, I'll run through really quick some of the symptoms that I deal with at least once a week, if not daily. I experience ringing in my ears, occasional blurriness. Cognitive issues have been probably one of my most frustrating parts of MS, which is not being able to multitask, sometimes not being able to find the word that I'm trying to think of, processing information. I have spasms in my stomach every night. The weakness recently, my muscles have started to stiffen up. I'm dealing with very severe constipation, numbness in my hands and my feet. Balance issues are a daily occurrence. Having falls. I can't stand but more than a few minutes. Insomnia, depression, anxiety, the fatigue that makes you feel like you're just, like a wet blanket on your shoulders. And, my attention, my focus, itchiness, heat intolerance, cold intolerance, sensitivity to loud noises, coordination issues, difficulty swallowing, vertigo, dizziness, restless leg. My mind is constantly spinning and running 20 million miles an hour. And probably the worst is the MS hug for me. I know a lot of people experience that. I've had it happen maybe 3 or 4 times. Hands down, worst pain in my life. It's like somebody squeezing your torso. You can't breathe. You feel nauseous. And it's a constant. You cannot do anything to make it get any better. Laying down, standing up, you just can barely breathe, and lasts about 15 minutes, at least for me. And then you can feel the muscles start to kind of relax, and comes out of nowhere. That's probably my most frightening symptom. But all in all, it's just a journey of not knowing what's going to pop up next. And if all of this was related with my muscle issues and all of that, is just can be frustrating. So all in all, that's where I'm at today. I currently have over 25 lesions in my brain and have recently gone into a secondary progressive MS. Here at Spoonful of Strength, we want to make this podcast interactive. We want to hear your stories, and we want you involved in our conversations. Follow Spoonful of Strength on Instagram, where we will post questions throughout the week. Your answers may be shared on our podcast. Do you have a story to share? Send us a message on Spoonful of Strength on Instagram with your health journey, and we may interview you on this show.
Can you explain a little more about the new diagnosis and what that how that changes the scope of MS as you had been dealing with it before?
Yeah, secondary progressive. Most people with relapsing remitting will go into the secondary progressive, and relapsing remitting means that you have a relapse and then you recover from it. So your symptoms may completely go away, or they may get you back to a baseline that's a little bit more than maybe where you started. But you do have that recovery period. Being told I'm in secondary progressive basically means that the symptoms are daily. They don't go away, and you're in a progressive state, which means you can still have relapses, but basically you just keep progressing. Most likely they see this in balance issues and the cognitive issues, having more falls, and just seeing your disability increase.
Thank you for sharing your journey, your diabetes and your MS journey. I feel it sounds that overall your diabetes as well, even though it takes daily management, that is in a situation where you have pretty good handle on being consistent with your blood sugars and keeping that diabetes under control. But at the same time, your MS is moving into that progressive stage. What impact do you feel going through, as you've been going through this MS journey, what impact do you feel that it has had on your relationship?
It's very hard with somebody who has a chronic illness. I was talking to my husband the other day, and I had read that 75% of marriages fail when one person has a chronic illness. And I can see that. And I can see how that can happen. My relationship with my husband has changed because of MS. We went through a really tough patch. I take most of the accountability for that because I had to leave my job. I had to start a new life of being a mother and a homemaker, and I didn't feel good enough. I didn't feel like I was worthy. I felt bad for making my husband get a new job. I felt bad if I couldn't do something, or if I was tired and dinner was a frozen pizza. It would lead me into, oh, I'm just not a good wife. I've been here all day. I can't even put a good meal on the table. So we went through the ringer, and with therapy and a lot of therapy for myself, as well as marriage counseling, we've made it through and end up, our relationship is stronger because of it. My kids are, I was crying at one point to my therapist, just saying, what kind of mother am I? I feel bad. I don't want my kids to be embarrassed if they see me walking with a cane around their friends. And he told me, you are giving your kids the gift of empathy, and you are showing them that anybody, no matter their disability, you can't judge a person by their disability, and giving them that gift. And my kids have very soft hearts, and they are very understanding if I can't make it to a baseball game for my oldest son, or I can't travel to see my middle son. And, they have compassion. And, when you look past that, family relationships change because I'm just not there as much as I want to be. I have mother, father, two sisters. I have an extended family who I want to be with. And I've had to cancel on many birthday parties and get-togethers because it was too far of a travel. Sometimes it was because my anxiety was high and I was afraid to be that far away from home. And so, obviously family changes when you're not as much a part of it. And I've had moments where, I feel like they're living the life and I'm the outsider. And I know that's my perception. I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth, but it's just that perception of I want to be there, but I don't think I can today, or whatever it might be. So, but that's what happens when you have a chronic illness. You have to make choices of, do I go and pay for it later, or do I stay home and give my body some rest time and all of that? It's been difficult managing the relationships, but I think the relationship of my husband and I at this moment is probably the best that it's been.
And a lot of times it can bring you closer. I definitely can see, when you quoted that statistic of, was it 75% of marriages or relationships would end when somebody has a chronic illness, and I can see where that can be difficult for the person on both sides, really. The frustrations with especially with the cognitive issues can be frustrating because it can frustrate on both sides of. What do you feel is the biggest challenge that you face or that you deal with your MS?
I think the biggest thing that I deal with MS right now is the fact that My mind still thinks I'm a fairly young 46-year-old woman who can do things, and my body and my brain is not telling me that it's probably not good. I was out of town this last week and wanted to do something special for my stepson. And I said, well, I will put up wallpaper in your house, not realizing that his ceilings were 10 feet tall. And I grabbed a ladder, I got up there, I started putting wallpaper up, and it wasn't, maybe, a short time later that I went to step down and my brain was telling me I was on the last step and I wasn't. And I fell 4 feet off the ladder. And those are the things that are frustrating.
Oh my gosh.
And those are the things that it's like, I know better. Like, I know I'm supposed to walk with my cane 24 hours a day. I've been told that by my doctor more than once. But do I know? I'm in the house because it's easier to do it without. And that's where I have a fall, and it brings me right back. And so it's very difficult with the progression of the disease to know my limitations because of what I want to do versus what I can do.
Right. I imagine there's times that you're like, I just want to be normal. I just want to walk from the couch to the bathroom like a normal person. Not a normal person, but a healthy person. Because you're still normal.
I don't think I've ever been normal, but that's okay. But
I was giving you a pass there.
I know you were. Yeah, I think, the other part of it, I think, is just the scariness of MS is so unpredictable that you don't know what life will look like tomorrow or what it's going to look like a year from now. I'm completely different now than I was a year ago in my disability. And it's that scariness of, at what point, will I get to the point where I have to be in a wheelchair? Will I get to the point where I, can't be left alone, or need more help than what I have? And those are things that are scary. And I try not to look beyond today and what I can do today. But yeah, it's just a beast. I'll turn it back around to the fact that it is just a beast.
Oh, do you feel if given the opportunity, if there was a clinical trial out there that resonated with you, would you consider being part of a clinical trial?
I think, understanding, I think what my doctors have said is I wouldn't be a good candidate for a clinical trial for either medicine or disability or anything like that because I have other issues that, like the diabetes and the muscle issues that, to be honest, they haven't pinned it on MS. I tend to feel like it probably is just MS, but I am actually just starting a clinical trial called MS Detect, and it is an app that goes on your phone. And I go into the office, I believe it's every 6 months. It's like a 2-year clinical trial. And they look at my disability score. They have me run through cognitive tests, walking tests, and they measure everything. And then in between those 6 months, you've got to go on this app and do those testing through the app, at different intervals. And my understanding is that this app could help communication with doctors. They would be able to see, okay, I haven't seen her in the office for 3 months. She just did all these testing. Maybe her scores have gone down, then, maybe we need to get her into the office, or where the doctors can kind of track your progress, especially with MS being, progressive.
So looking back on the journey you've been on, have any advice?
So I think the advice I would give to somebody going through any diagnosis is just be knowledgeable, but don't go down the rabbit hole of Google. Be sure to ask a lot of questions, and be your own advocate of if you're experiencing some symptom and the doctor is not listening, or they don't understand the severity of how you're feeling, then definitely speak up. I also feel like, giving yourself a little bit of grace of, it's a hard transition to go from being a healthy person and then receiving that diagnosis. So I think that you have to just give yourself time to absorb the news and to accept it, and definitely lean on the people that are there for you and allow them to help you. Because I went through a period in time where I didn't really allow people to help me, and that was something that I regret. So just give yourself patience and time.
I think that's great advice for anybody with any health journey that they're going on. Do you have anything else that you want to share with everyone?
I'm excited to start this new chapter where I can learn about other people's diagnosis, learn about other diseases, because we may all have different diseases or illnesses, but we all experience chronic pain, chronic fatigue, and you need people when you're going through all of this. You need people who understand what you're going through, and so we can all listen to each other and hear each other and be there for each other. And I started SpoonFull of Strength for that reason only. The other reason that I wanted to start SpoonFull of Strength is more than just a community of, an Instagram page or a Facebook page, but doing this podcast and being able to share with you. I have an Etsy page called SpoonFull of Strength that has shirts for people with chronic conditions. Also in our shop, we have inspirational shirts, just something, cozy sweatshirt that says, this is my Flare Day sweatshirt, when you're just feeling bad and you just want a blanket and a sweatshirt, and, candles that, you can light when you're not feeling well, and things like that. And so it's all of these things coming together as one, just to support the chronic illness community. I have high hopes for what we can do, and I appreciate you coming on to this journey with me. And, for all of you out there, we just are looking forward to the future and hearing your stories. And we look forward to interviewing people with different diagnoses that we don't maybe have a lot of information about, talking about mental health. We want to talk to the caregivers of the people that are experiencing chronic illness, and just kind of coming together in all of those different areas to support each other. So I'm really excited as to what's to come.
All right. I think that is a great way to wrap it up. And thank you all for joining us.
So next week we'll be back on Tuesday, where we will talk a little bit about managing daily life. How do you manage your life when you're going through a relapse, monitoring your symptoms, just dealing with the ups and downs of the disease? So we look forward to talking with you more next week. If you have any questions or comments, please add them. We'll be back next Tuesday. Take care. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.